the turbulence, I think, was just so necessary because when I finally got to the point of where I was just so sick of it, I was so frustrated, I was so done. I really had so many cries for help where I would just, at the end towards these accounts or new seat leases, I'm just like, you know, just get rid of me then. If I'm not going to make it, get rid of me because I can't take it anymore. And then ultimately, you get another opportunity and then you feel fresh again. You got more money in your account, then you push, and actually get kicked down again. And then ultimately, I got a time where just things worked for me, and it's just that's why to this day, I feel like I can lose for months or even a year. And at the end of the day, as long as I'm still in business, I know there will be a time I will make it back. I believe that. And I know there will be a time where I'll make money.
I don't care how good you are in anything, you don't have discipline, you ain't nobody.
Right.
You're nothing without discipline. Because you give up under the slightest struggle without discipline. Discipline is doing what you hate to do, but do it like you love it.
Hey guys, we are here with Anthony Crudele. I have wanted to get Anthony on here for a while. I've followed his podcast Futures Radio for a long time. And I wanted to get him on here. Something we talk about a lot on this channel is the mental edge in trading. When you're a trader, you go through so many ups and downs in the markets, and you go through strife, pain, triumph, failure. Like I always say, the way to be a good futures trader and something that you become very talented in is being able to smile and cry at the same time. um, and Anthony's story was one that kind of really inspired me when I first started trading and getting very serious about the markets, because I also was going through a rough time. It also seems like, certain people don't really talk about the bad times. They just talk about the good times. And I like that Anthony was honest, real, and open about it. So I wanted to bring him on here. So how are you doing today, Anthony?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you, man. Like, it's something that I wanted to do for a while. I know I've probably hit you up like once in a while over the years, and I know you're so busy. So thanks for carving out some time for us.
Yeah, no, I'm excited and I've chatted with you a little bit before and just seeing your growth over the last, couple of years that I've been following you on Twitter and just hearing you talk and so I'm really honored to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me.
No, thanks, man. Much appreciated. So I guess the thing to start with, like the part of the story that inspired me is like, your early years. But let's go back even further. Was there anything in your childhood that made you think that you might be a trader one day? Or is it something that completely came out of nowhere?
Yeah, no, nothing in my childhood even would have come close to preparing me or getting me I guess I would say, knowing even what markets are. I mean, I don't even know what markets are. My parents really weren't in the stock market. Obviously I'm in futures markets, but even though the floors were so popular in Chicago from CME, CBOE, CBOT, I didn't really know anybody, in the markets. And so my early years were really just, I was most likely going to be either in some sort of community college situation, or probably working for the Teamsters or, some sort of city job. That's really where my path was. It was, and so I had no idea about markets.
Nice. So besides that, did you do anything like the athletics? Were you involved in anything like that growing up?
Yeah, I was actually pretty good at basketball. I played pretty much every day. I remember taking my bike for miles to the Y, and I would play a lot of hoops just really anywhere. And the better I got as a young player, I joined leagues, and eventually when I got to high school, I played. I made the freshman and sophomore team, and then after that, I just kind of got into partying and got away from it a little bit. But basketball was the sport I did. And I also took cross country because at the time I was really trying to get in shape for basketball. Basketball was just really my focus, as a sport. And so one of my coaches had said, he's like, you may want to consider cross country. And I was like, all right. So I went in and I did that. And I actually really enjoyed that. And I carried that over that exercise routine, we'll call it, over to my current day. I'm in my mid 40s now, and I love to run. I don't run as much nearly as I used to, but on a regular basis, I'm constantly running. And I just remember, just like those routines of running and just being in your own headspace, for that period of time. I look forward to running more than anything.
No, that's awesome. And for me, I'm in the same boat. I grew up playing soccer, basketball. I started riding bikes. And I think that why I brought that up is, when you're in some sort of athletics like that, like basketball's a very dynamic game. It's one of the games that are a team game that you can play by yourself. You can play with two people, you can play with three, you can play with four, you can play with five, play with more than that if you really want to. It gets rough, but you can. And so it's kind of interesting to see, like, when you get into something that's like a rough time, the way you talk about it, and why I wanted to bring it up is kind of, you talk about it like an athlete. Like, you talk about the things you have to go through, push through. And that's cool also to talk about, like, these years later, getting into your 40s and still kind of keeping that routine. I always talk about how important it is to be moving in general, movement in general. Go to the gym, work out, something just for your brain. Like you just said, I think the key point that you brought out is that ability to tune out. Like, if you're stuck on something, especially in the markets, if you're stuck on something, you're trying to solve it all day, every day, like, it doesn't happen. But if you can kind of tune it out and take a break, come back to it, I think that's great. And kind of, it's interesting to think of just the way you've talked over the years and listening to you so much talk about those things. So going to the next part. So if we're, you're growing up and then you decide to get into markets, where exactly does that come in? Like you said, it's not something that you thought would happen, and then all of a sudden it does happen.
Well, markets for me came into my life by accident. Right out of high school, within a year out of high school, I was in a bad car accident and I had a broken left femur. And so I had multiple surgeries on it and it was pretty bad. And I didn't have a path from that point. And there was a lot that kind of went around at that moment. Like for me, originally right out of high school, I had went to 3 months. I spent 3 months in Florida. I came down to Florida because I wanted to learn about the tourism industry. I was very intrigued by Disney World and just travel. And because as a kid, I never traveled anywhere. I didn't go on a plane until I was in high school. It was like my first, vacation outside of, really the Midwestern states, besides, Wisconsin, Illinois. Was where I was from, Michigan. Maybe we only drove on vacations. We never flew. And so I was very intrigued by it. So I spent 3 months in Orlando. I came back home and immediately I got in a car accident. Literally, I think it was like a week or two after I got home. And so I didn't even have a chance to even really look at what my life could be in terms of college or any of that stuff. It just happened so fast. And so coming out of the accident, I took a job as a runner. I remember looking in the classifieds and seeing a job that said runner. I was downtown Chicago. I'm like, I don't want to be in the suburbs. I lived in the western suburbs, which was actually very close to the city limits, but I just wanted to be downtown on the trading floor. And so trading came into my life by that route. And so I ended up going down to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and working for a company called Lynn Walduck, which I don't even know if they still exist, but at the time they were the basic uh, basically the only firm you can get into the business with. Not the only one, but they were the one that most people came through. So I got a job with them as a runner. Like I think it was like $3 or $4 an hour, and the rest is kind of history, man. I kind of fell into it.
Oh, that's so awesome. And, like, something also to add is the femur is, and I've talked about me breaking so many bones, and getting hurt so many as a professional BMX rider. Like, of course, I had a lot of injuries. I never broke my femur. It's the biggest bone in your body.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen once, and it's gnarly. Like, so
Well,
it's hats off to you to be able to run on that again. I know a lot of guys weren't the same after an injury like that. So that's kudos to you for getting back up on the horse and being able to run after that.
yeah, I had a
So
compound fracture. It came actually not to gross people out, but I actually came through, and I was actually for temporarily paralyzed from the waist down. I couldn't feel my legs when I was in the car. I tried to move up. I remember trying to move up. I could actually feel my legs, but I had no like movement. I had somehow like lost. It was just very, very strange feeling. Well, luckily it didn't hit. You know, you got a main artery inside your femur or inside your thigh area, and my bone came out the opposite way. So luckily it came outward. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here right now.
Thank
It
God,
was a rough time. Yeah,
I've seen it the other way too. I've seen that get hit and it's really bad, and like if you don't get it's an artery that if you don't get in the hospital quick enough, you're gonna die. Like
you're
it's
gonna
that
die.
dire. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's wild. And so, you go through that and then you become a runner. Now, for people that don't know, what is a runner on the floor?
Oh, a runner on the floor is where you're taking orders from one broker to the next. And so you're taking it from a desk to a pit broker, or you're taking it from a pit broker back to the desk. So you're taking orders that need to be filled to the pit broker from the desk, and they call it paper. That's why sometimes you'll see people say, paper's buying, paper's selling. That means that's a broker order. So typically those are the big orders that come into the pit and still to the screen. And this day it's just obviously done differently. And then, or you'll take an order that's filled and executed back to the desk, then you would timestamp it, and then you would take that back to the clearing firm, and that's how that order got processed. That's what a runner did.
No, I love that. And I think it's really interesting too, is that, you guys who really, and I'm fortunate to have learned from a lot of floor traders. But you guys all have a sense of the market that's wild. And like I tell people, like I look at the charts and I see people, and they think I'm like, talking about like I'm schizophrenic or something, but it's like in reality, like you guys really did, because you could hear I'd hear it described as you could hear the sounds of people get loud during certain moments when you should also be, cautious, or people getting quiet around certain moments, which tells you that volatility is low and things like that. And you guys could kind of feel that. So I guess the next step is then you get into floor trading. So how exactly did you go from a runner to a trader?
Well, it's a process that I wish still existed today, but it doesn't, unfortunately. And how I went from a runner to a trader is I went from a runner to an ARB clerk. An ARB clerk is somebody that's, doing ARB, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and buying is towards your hands, selling's away from your face. That's how it was at CME. I think it's the opposite at CBOT, but nonetheless, I did that and the Eurodollar options. So I went from clerking at Lynn Waldock, Refco, and then I went and worked for a company called MPM Trading in the Eurodollar options, and I was an ARB clerk for them. And then from there, I went and became a trade checker for locals, which are independent traders in the S&P 500 pit. And after I did that, I started going through membership. At the time, I was making pretty good money. I was also delivering pizzas. I worked at UPS. I was, doing whatever I could, man, to be honest with you, to make extra money. And I was saving up because I wanted to become a local in the S&P. Once I got into the S&P pit, I knew that's the pit I wanted to be in. They were way too smart for me in the Eurodollars and the other markets. I wasn't going to make it in there, although I kind of wish I did stay in there in some ways. But ultimately, I ended up saving up some money and opening up an account and applied for membership. I had to go. You have to take a test. You have to do a background check, all of that stuff. In the meantime, there was electronic trading coming around, and this is the year of 1997, 98. The E-mini S&P was now becoming a market, and so I was going up into the Globex Center while I was waiting for my seat, and I was watching the E-mini S&P at the times that I wasn't on the floor clerking, because there was a lot of downtime at the time. I was checking trades for locals, so they trade the morning, they trade the close, middle of the day. We did nothing. We went to lunch or we gambled or who knows what we did. But I mean, so ultimately that's how I ended up becoming a member. Eventually, they said, you're approved, and then I had to wait for a seat lease and then all of that, and then I got in.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's very interesting. Like you said, it's a very different time because nowadays, like, you really had to go through it to even get on the floor back then.
Yeah.
Nowadays, anybody just opens up an account, they write about being a trader every day, and they're a trader. And it's like you really had to go through a lot to get there. Now there's things like prop firms and different things, but there's not many avenues for new traders to really get into these days. So it's kind of interesting to hear about the days of the floor traders. And the one thing that I've always loved about all of you is just like the way you guys see the charts is just totally different. If you guys get a chance, I know you have a what's the series called? Trading Your Edge?
I have developed your edge. Yeah.
Develop Your Edge. Yeah, the Develop Your Edge series has a bunch of cool stuff in there. So you guys should check that out if you haven't. No, I have your channel on my channel on YouTube, so I'm sure they've seen it. But yeah, that's definitely a good thing to watch and learn about trading. Um, but yeah, so getting the next step, you're trading. You finally get on the floor, and also I wanted to add the euro dollar futures, meaning the 3-month bond futures. Some people might think euro dollar and they don't know that's actually the 3-month bond futures, correct?
Yeah. I mean, people, not the euro currency.
Yes, not the euro
Yeah. The
currency.
euro dollar, which actually no longer exists. It's really SOFR now.
Yeah, crazy. But
I know.
yeah, it's so weird. But yeah, so moving, yeah, I even see the charts changed recently, and I was like, that's so weird. Um, but yeah, so you start trading. You're in the E-minis, and then you go through some turbulence at this point, if I remember correctly, to
It's
say
an
it nicely.
understatement.
To say
Yeah.
it nicely. So what exactly happened there? And how much turbulence did you go through at that time?
Well, to be clear, I'm still going through turbulence. I'm coming off a losing day today. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But
Mhm.
ultimately, I think that, the beginning of your career, you have to almost really expect, not even anticipate, like you have to expect turbulence. You have to expect pushback. The markets are not very welcoming. They're not very inviting. They may seem that way on the onset, but they're not. The market's going to try and take from you, and it's either you take from the market or the market takes from you. I really do look at it that way. And I think I look at it that way because because of where I was at the beginning of my career. And I felt like no matter what I did, even when I did the right thing, the market found a way to take from me. And I started thinking from a mental side, I want to be a taker, not a giver, because it's easy to get in this trap of just giving to the market. And you could be one of these people that just continues to put money in your account. You just keep giving to the market. And it just is like, it's just contagious in that way, right? And it becomes an addiction in its own right. Losing is an addiction.
Mhm.
And, that I'm not going to say that's where I was at that point in time, but I'm saying that I felt that it easily could have gotten to that point, right? Where you're like, you just keep feeding the beast. I went through three $25,000 accounts. Two of those $25,000 accounts were borrowed money. I had to borrow an additional $10,000 from my aunt at the end of all of that. Working at night, still clerking at times, doing everything I could to keep afloat. And, eventually, I wouldn't say that it clicked. Here's what I would say about this, because this is something that I think is extremely important. We don't talk about luck enough in this business. And I hate
Mm.
to use the words luck, that like I got lucky, because I don't really feel that way. I feel that I existed long enough for my strategy to now really get respected by the market. And I mean that in the sense of everything I had done to that point got me there, to be ready for when the market environment was finally conducive for my strategy. That's the way that I can put it. And so when I was on my last dollars, all of a sudden everything just was working for me. When I was really doing nothing different, maybe 6 months prior, maybe a year or two prior, this is about year 3 into year 4 when things started to turn for me. It was just a matter of, I would say, the market environment, and I was in a better mindset. I was already there. I had already been pushed to broke so many times that I'm sick of losing. I'm done with it. I'm just so sick of this bullshit. I can't take it no more, right? Just like, I've got to turn a buck. Everyone's telling you to quit, go get a city job now, or whatever it is I was going to do. And at the end of the day, I was just, I was fed up for the most part. And ultimately, I just got so tight with my risk that when things started to work my way, I just started to take from the market. I was not scared to really pound it. And, and so things started to accelerate for me to the upside. And I know maybe we can touch base on that or how that all worked. But the turbulence, I think, was just so necessary because when I finally got to the point of where I was just so sick of it, I was so frustrated, I was so done. I really had so many cries for help where I would just, at the end towards these accounts or new seat leases, I'm just like, you know, just get rid of me then. If I'm not going to make it, get rid of me because I can't take it anymore. And then ultimately, you get another opportunity and then you feel fresh again. You got more money in your account, then you push, and actually get kicked down again. And then ultimately, I got a time where just things worked for me, and it's just that's why to this day, I feel like I can lose for months or even a year. And at the end of the day, as long as I'm still in business, I know there will be a time I will make it back. I believe that. And I know there will be a time where I'll make money. Now, it's not going to be every day. It's not going to be every week. It's not going to be every month. You know, that's just the way it is. And I'm just so much more patient now because I can lose for months. But if I start losing, I just start peeling it back. It is what it is. I just look at it like that. I mean, it's not going to take me out of business. I take me out of business now. And that's the difference. Before, I was just on such thin margins all the time that I had no room for error. And I think that's really something that, maybe we'll discuss a little bit more, but, I think financially, I think it makes it difficult for people if they don't have supplemental income or enough capital to exist, then, you're fighting an uphill battle that you probably won't win. And I'm not trying to be negative on it, but if you can't exist to the time when the market is conducive for you and your strategy, you're not going to make it.
No, I love that because that's something my nephew's getting interested in trading. He's 18. He's trying to learn. He's like, trying to put together a small stake to trade. He's like, I'm going to be just like you and put together this small stake. And I'm like, look, man, like it's just not how it works. Like the amount of money, like you're talking like taking $1,000 and making like $1,000 a week or something. Like it's never gonna happen. And like you
Yeah.
said with the luck aspect, like I love that you bring that up because I always say that my positioning and the way I set myself up as a trader is to get lucky. Like I'm basically trying to take my macro models and my systems, make me luckier. All of those things together just put me in a situation where I can get lucky. And the market being conducive to your style of trading is everything. Like
It
if
is.
you're a day trader and the market's choppy, like you will probably do much better than someone like me who's more of a longer term trend follower. If there's Bitcoin was a great example because I remember I had a buddy who was a great, fantastic day trader. He was one of the best I've ever met. And in 2017, I was making a killing because I'm sitting there long this trend and not doing anything. And he's trading in and out of it. And, he performed well that year, but I'm killing it. And then the next year, and if we just look at Bitcoin, the next year, the market was more conducive to him and he's killing it. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like what exactly fits, and you can talk about because I have people who will be like, well, then trade everything. It's like, no, you'll never do that. You can't be every type of trader. You can't be everywhere all the time. You can build some different types of strategies, sure, but that's still you will end up in periods where you are unlucky. You will just be unlucky. So, that part of your story is important, and I also really like the capital aspect. If you do not, have people who will see, like, for example, what a trend portfolio looks like. You have tons of different positions. They'll see my portfolio and they'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to get a futures account. I'm going to take all the positions you have. And I'm like, that's impossible. Like, you have to have a lot, like, you have to either be running money or something. Like, you can't have 30, 40 futures positions without the capital to do so. So, like, as you're kind of looking at that, it's really interesting to think that those are things that kind of go over people's heads a lot. Like you're talking about it being a losing game, if that's the case. Yes, absolutely. And it's good to, yes, you have $1,000, you want to learn how to trade, you want to mess with it, you want to figure it out. Know that $1,000 will probably go to zero. Like if you're using leverage of any sort, it will probably go to zero, and that's totally okay. It's how it goes in the markets. It's not very easy to just start trading. You talk about the journey, and that's what I've always loved about your story so much. The journey is everything. And as you're on that journey, with your ability to go again and again and again, get back up. Hey, and like you said too, the losing mentality. Like when you get into a loser's mentality as a trader, like nothing's more dangerous. So a little bit more on that, because I love the way you brought that up, and it sounded like you've thought about that a little bit before. You know, what's the difference between that losing mentality, and when did you start to feel like you were kind of going towards a winner's mentality as a trader?
I just think it was the mere fact I was fed up. I was tired of being on the losing side. I want to say a loser because I think that's a little harsh. I don't feel that I felt as though I was a loser, but I just was just sick of losing. I mean, I feel that same type of scenarios to this day where there's times where I'm just in a losing rut and I'm like, you know what? Are you done with this? And sometimes it's not. I always say this. Is it me? Is it the market environment? Okay. Or is it my strategy? If I can identify what it is anytime I'm in a drawdown, then that helps obviously significantly because I know how to fix it. If it's my strategy, well, then I just either trade smaller or I don't trade. Is it the market environment? Well, I just trade smaller or I don't trade. Is it me? Okay, well, now I got to kind of work my way through it. I got to get my head out of my ass, right? And so I think that for me, going through those different cycles is what gave me the ability to identify one of those three or two of those three in certain situations. And so fighting through that at that time, we talk about the journey is what got me able to fight through it in present day. It's still not clean. It's not like, the beginning of January for me was actually kind of clean, and then the last week or so has been a little bit tougher. I'm really not doing that much, and that's part of it. Like I've been, I had a swing position today that got stopped out, that I held on for a week long. S&P ends up going, after all that time I hold it, I make no money on it, right?
Hmm.
Then at the trading at the end of the month, it's FOMC day. I can't wait to be long. I wait, I step in, I lose money. It's like, okay, now sometimes the things I'm touching are just losers. There's just, it's like, or they're going your way and they're coming right back. And you're like, all right, like what's going on? Is it the market environment changing again? Which I think is the most important thing for traders to start understanding is that we go through a lot of different market environments now in rapid pace, like we never used to before. I never saw changing market environments like I see these days. We can go from a bull market to a bear market to back to a bull market to a consolidation to a bull market or a bear market. And I don't necessarily mean it on the massive spectrum that some people talk about. Is this a bull market or is this a bear market? But
Hmm.
we go into these times where the market's just straight up or straight down or just sideways versus the first 10, 15 years of my career, it was a much slower moving market. This is not the same. The last 10 years, markets come in and out of environments. It's insane how fast it happens. And some people would totally disagree with me. But I will tell you this from a day trader's perspective, I find that markets are very conducive for my strategy less often than they were in the past. And it's just because I have to be pickier about those times, right? And if I try to force it in times when it's not, I lose. There's just not a lot to think about. And so if I didn't go through this in the past, I don't know how I would be able to deal with this in modern day markets.
No, that's a great point. And I think in general that's something that we don't talk about enough and isn't touched on enough, which is like the market environment means so much. And understanding and identifying and when to hold them and when to fold them. Like you said, like there's a time where like you're pushing. Like we all do that. We all push our trades. Like nobody gets every market environment right. People talk about it. Yeah, there's a difference between analysts and traders, right? That's something you and I know more than anything in the world. There's
Yeah.
a difference between talking about it and being about it. So when you're actually trading, like you will run into these periods. Yes. I could come on here today and you could come on here today and be like, by the end of the year, I think the S&P will be higher. It means nothing to me or you. It's a thing people say and it sounds cool. It's a good clickbait, but really, like as a trader, it's how are you going to trade it? When are you going to get in and out of things? Where's your stop loss? Like those are the things that really matter, and that's where your edges really start to come in. So I love that you keep bringing up the environment thing. So getting to the next step. So you're trading, you finally feel like things are kind of coming together. Did you have any mentors at the time that kind of helped you with that, or was it something that you just kind of pushed through and at a certain point it just started to come together?
I had a lot of mentors, some that knew they were mentoring me, some that didn't, probably more that didn't know that, but I just asked a lot of questions and I just internalized a lot of it and tried to figure it out myself. Nobody is going to take you from point A to point B in this business. It's just not going to happen unless you're sitting next to them and they're following your strategy and you guys are similar personalities and you have, if you're in a prop situation, like a real prop, not what they call prop nowadays, but a real prop, those people can be mentored directly. And I can see how a lot of them can have, success from one person to the next. I know a lot of guys that have gone through that. But from the way I went through it, it was just really just a lot of older guys, people that had been in the business longer than me asking questions, understanding about this or about that, and just finding my way through it, right? I mean, you as an independent trader have to have this inner push inside you that it exceeds really any obstacle that may come your way and that you are going to be willing to work through it no matter what, right? I mean, there's no way, if I didn't believe that this is exactly who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be, it would have never happened. It doesn't matter how much they help me, right? Because I would have guys tell me, we're going up today, or buy it here, or this is what you're doing wrong, all these different things. And they'd be right, dead right. And I'd still lose money. And so, how does that translate into me eventually figuring it out? I just think that there's capitulation with where you are as a person and in this business, and maybe I'm sure with other businesses too, but where you either get to a point where you just say, I'm going to figure this out or not. I don't really know how else to put it because I've never been the smartest guy. I've never been the person who reads the market the best. I've never looked at myself as better than anybody else out there. I don't feel that way. I don't think about it. I don't really think about it in general, but I just know that I want it. And so I'm going to figure out what I can in my little world to make it happen for me. Right. I mean, and that's it. I don't think that there's anything more to say about it. Either you want to do this or you don't.
No, that's perfect. And it's something that I really feel that so deeply as you say that, and as I've listened to you over the years, because it's like that's the one thing I always feel more than anything else is like I couldn't do anything else but be a trader. I
Yeah.
don't want to, like it's in me to do this to a point where I couldn't do anything else. I even got to a point one time where I was like, it was right around the time I found your stuff, actually. I was at some really bad point. I had blown up another account, done something else stupid, and I was like crying like a kid. And I don't cry much, but I was crying like a child in the bathroom. And I started laughing hysterically, and I was like, "Well, I'm in finance. Like, I'll figure it out. Like at some
Yeah.
point, like maybe I'll have to do something different, but I'll figure it out." And then I realized, like, I can't do anything different. I love to trade. Like, so it was like all of those things kind of come together, and you're like, you just have to make it work when you love doing something so much. Um, and that's such a cool part of your story because it's just really, I think it's insightful for most people because there's a lot of people out there that they look online and they see everybody talk about the good times. Hey, I'm making so much money. Hey, I can't believe you didn't buy Dogecoin at this. There's, some crazy stuff. And it's like the reality of trading is what we are talking about right here. It is hard. It isn't easy. Yes, it's lucrative. It's great when you start to get it right. But it takes a long time. It takes a lot of work. You will make a lot of mistakes. I have so many people who talk about how, they're the mistakes they're making and they feel like it's nobody else in the world, and it's like, no, because, for me, that's the story of my life is like failure, like, and that's also the thing I like that you said about the loser's mentality, which is like, I've had that so many different times from bike riding to, being a professional, winning things and still being miserable, like still feeling like I didn't do anything right or could have done so much better, to, trading and still being miserable, like, and then one day, you start to hit that, like you said, capitulation, like call it rock bottom, capitulation, it's all the same thing. And then you hit that point and you have nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
You start to figure it out just because you have to. And like that's just inside you or it isn't, and that's the best way to put it. It's inside you or it isn't. And it's cool that, it's inside you. And so, the on the mentor thing, I love that you said that. I don't think I've ever heard anybody ever say it the way you said it, which is you had a lot of mentors that they didn't know they were your mentor. That was
Yeah.
so cool because really like that's me, I remember this is a funny story and it's kind of embarrassing, but when I was a little kid, I used to write all these bike riders and I would be like, hey, like, it was AOL Instant Messenger back then. I'd be like, hey, how do you do this trick? How do you do a tail whip? How do you do a bar spin? How do you do, like, and I all the time, like, I'd bother them in the middle of the night. The one time to the point where some guy was like, dude, can you stop messaging me at 5 in the morning? Like, it was just wild stuff like that. And like, that's the way I was with trading at the beginning too. It was like, hey, how do you do this? How do you learn this? And there's so much information out there and there's so many good traders that like, once again, like you said, I couldn't ever find somebody who is exactly like me to trade. That's why I always kind of say, like I have a service. I do a lot better at my service. I said, you just trade like me and you'll make money. But my service is, hey, you have to learn how to trade for yourself. I just put this information out as what I'm doing so you can learn how to trade for yourself. Like, because that's really the truth. You can't fit yourself into my style or your style. You have to figure out your own style. So, when did you find your own style as a trader? What do you think if you were to explain to somebody that's just watching this, never seen anything from you before, how would you describe your style of trading that you found during those times?
Well, then is a little different than what I am now, but how I found a style of trading that I liked was once again just by trial and error. I wouldn't say that it was any particular moment. It was coming down to, first of all, I think you have to pick the market you want to be in. I think that's not even talked about nearly enough, because if you're coming into this business and you're just trading S&P, NASDAQ, Russell, just the indexes, or you're trading oil and you really are doing it just because they're the popular markets, then you already are, I think, are at somewhat of a disadvantage because you're just doing it because they're popular versus possibly exploring other markets, maybe bonds, treasuries, certain markets that might be more conducive, we'll use that word again, to your style and the way that you see the tape. Because I have met very few people in my life that if they're futures traders, that they can trade a bunch of different markets. Like I know bond traders, I know treasury traders, right? I know, guys that trade, vol traders, I know options traders, I know S&P traders, I know NASDAQ traders. Very seldom do I find a guy who trades NASDAQ and SOFR or 10-year. It just doesn't happen often. And they're just two different animals. And so I think when you look at derivatives markets, you really first off have to define where you need to be. And then from there, then you can kind of decide what's the best strategy for you, right? And so for me at that time, how I found it was, I was over trading continually, and I found that I needed to find something that would give me an edge, or at least believe that I had an edge in instances where I can trade aggressively and not overtrade the situation, right? And so that's how I found myself as a scalper, right? As an early age scalper, right? I would come in and it would be like, brokers be loud, or I had something there on the little chart I'd be watching because we didn't really have a ton of charts, so you're going back a little bit, and I would get in aggressive in those areas, and that's where I started to get good. I don't know, people know much about me, but I really like Bollinger Bands. I started using them very early on, but just finding a couple of indicators to really help me in certain spots where I could be somewhat aggressive. And so that's ultimately how I found it. And then as time goes by, you're constantly refining it because I'm not really a scalper anymore. This is something that I think that people don't even really understand what it is, because I think nowadays people talk about scalping like it's, you're coming in and you're just, you're scalping for 2, 3, 4 points in the S&P. Well, when I scalped for 2 ticks, 3 ticks. I'd buy 50, 100, 200 or whatever it was, and I'd try to be out immediately. If it didn't go my way, I would be out immediately, and I was just trading nonstop, right? Now, I was trading nonstop at areas that we liked, and if there was broker interest or if there was something there, I wasn't just doing it every tick, right? But ultimately, that's what scalping was. Now, mind you, at that time, the markets didn't move the way that they move now. If I step in right now and try to make 2 ticks in the S&P to risk 2 ticks, I'm going to lose nonstop. I have no chance of beating the machines. My friends that are market makers in this business would love a guy like me to just step in and compete with them. I can't. I know it. I've stepped away from it. And so now I have to be much pickier. I have to have a smaller position on. I've got to be able to withstand an initial storm that comes through with volatility in an intraday basis to be able to hold it. Bottom line. I mean, so I'm different in that sense. I've had to expand, not because I wanted to, because at any time you're making money, you don't want to change it. But if you don't, you're not making money anymore. So you better figure it out.
No, I love that. And it's important to also just understand, things like volatility. Like volatility of a product is probably one of the most important things and inside
Yes,
your
it
time
is.
frame. So like,
Yep.
if I'm trading Bitcoin, I always say this, and people, they have no idea what exactly this means. I'll try to explain it a little bit better. I say, if I'm trading, I'm a long-term trader. I'm trading something like Bitcoin. I have a 35% trailing stop on that. And people will go, that's insane. How do you even trade with that? And it's like, well, the positions are small. They're very small positions because my time frame is so long. The shorter your time frame, then that changes. Now you have bigger positions. So it's all, kind of understanding your time frame, understand the volatility of the product, and understanding like you can't get stopped out 50 times because that's the death by 1,000 cuts. People don't talk about that a lot, where yes, you can be very disciplined with having stop loss. That doesn't mean it's going to work out well if your stop is too tight in a market that's too volatile. So you have to have a way of identifying that. So yeah, that's cool that over time I think all of our strategies change. And I think the one thing I do see a lot, whether it's day traders, position traders, we kind of go a little bit longer term, look for a little bit bigger gains, things like that over time. And patience kind of seems to come into play. So, to end
There's a
off,
reason for that, though.
go ahead.
And I think that that's the reason why that is because markets have become more volatile in the age of computers.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't acknowledge that, then you're under a rock, right? I mean, everybody wants to be shorter term because you ultimately have if you make money sooner than later, if you're wrong sooner than later. Nobody likes sitting through all this volatility, but you don't have a choice. If you want to get from point A to point B in these markets, especially in the indexes, look at the S&P. A 1% move now is 50 points, whatever it is, right? Versus just 5 years ago, a 1% move was 30 points. So it's a very different market. And so when you look at it from a percentage basis, you have to expand outward. Look at these stocks like in NVIDIA. I mean, look at NVIDIA, AMD, the way that they move. I mean, you can be short term, but you're going to get stopped out a lot more, right? I don't care how much you're right. And so in order to reduce that, you have to go wider, because the only way you can have a stronger hand in the position is to be wider. So as traders get into more volatile environments, we have to size down and widen our stops. If the markets weren't very volatile, I'd trade size and work the bid or the offer in these indexes, and it would be a totally different market. But it's not the case. It just isn't, and so it's the race for speed still. It's not over. You've got so many of these big market makers out there with speed. And as a trader, as an independent trader who you're not competing with them, but they are creating the market environment. So if that's the case, then in order to exist, just as it was differently for me 10, 20 years ago, I had to adapt to what that environment was. I don't care what they're doing. Doesn't matter. But they're creating an environment that is about speed, that is about, volatility. And so you have to recognize when those changes are occurring. I mean, look at zero DTE options, how much they've changed the marketplace into the close. And that's not even necessarily a speed thing until you get towards the end of the day. And then everyone has got these outstanding positions on that people are trading, SPX options that probably shouldn't be. And you've got a lot of retail and you've got a lot of market makers in there. And, we're moving through strikes or around a big strike or protecting a strike into the close. And so that changes the environment. Doesn't matter what you think, if it's good, right, wrong, or indifferent. Doesn't matter. I hate people that make excuses because it's going to change again, and it's going to change again, and it's going to be different, and it might revert back to old, different ways. It may, or it may not. But once again, what do you want to do? Do you want to make money, or do you want to complain about it? What do you want to do? I mean, I don't complain about the market because nobody cares, first of all. And at the end of the day, I have to deal with what I have to deal with. And so I constantly, as a trader, am adapting my strategy and widening out most of the time because the market's making me, right? Not because whatever I was doing before was working so well. I've said this a million times on Twitter. Everything works sometimes, nothing works all the time. And nothing in this business is linear. Just because you made money today with this does not mean you'll make money at this point later doing the same thing you did here. It is just not the case. I wish it was, but it isn't.
No, and that's great because if when you go back, I've made a post about something similar once, the turtle trading system. You go back to the turtle system, 50-day buy 50-day highs, sell 25-day lows. Look at Jerry Parker today. His systems are mainly 200-day highs and selling 50-day to 100-day lows.
Now let me ask you a question. Why do you think that is?
Volatility has changed.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Completely.
Yeah.
So volatility has changed, and it's the same thing if I back test and I back tested the 70s, back tested even the 30s. When I back test those periods, volatility is completely different. Completely different. And then today it's huge in comparison. So if you look at the implied move back then to today, I mean it's insane. It's insanely different. And then if you just do ATR study, simple ATR, like go do an ATR study, go through the 30s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. I mean, then today, like it's wild. It's wildly different. The drawdowns, the V bottoms, it's completely different than it used to be. So these are all things that you really have to continually pay attention to and adapt to as a trader. Like if you're not adapting to that, you're gonna get killed in the markets. Like that's the thing why it's like I always talk about you have to have some form of systematic way of looking at your stop loss. I think
Absolutely.
so at least, like I think it's important to do that because of the volatility and the changes in it. And when you trade, I trade a lot of different products. So when you trade all these different products, you have to understand it quickly through all these different products. And so I think that's something that could be taken to any trader's portfolio. I don't trade. People always look at me and they go, "You trade so many different products," and it's like, yeah, I do, but you guys trade way more stocks than I do. Like somebody look at the stock market, and they'll be trading 700, 800 stocks and looking at everything, and I don't do any of that. I just look at the futures markets, and I didn't start out here either. So volatility is incredibly important. So to end off on, if you were to go back, you're going through that time, you broke your femur, you're starting to go into the markets just a little bit. You're just kind of getting your life together in that direction, and you're going through the rough time actually. What would you tell your younger self?
Think longer term. You're too focused on the short term. Your head's so worried about making money right now. Your head's so worried about making all this money. You're so focused on what you need right now versus just making money. I mean, I see the same young people making the same mistakes. I'm going to make 10,000 R. I'm going to, you know what I mean? I'm going to make all 10,000 X or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
And they're trying to do all these crazy things. How about just try to make money? How about just try to get a return? How about try to just build wealth, right? And the reason why most of these people are looking for stupid returns is because they don't have money. And I was the same
Mhm.
guy,
Yeah.
right? And they're looking for those stupid returns to make it seem, the biggest returns I ever had were when I had the least amount of money.
Mhm.
Now you tell me if I could sit every year and get 10, 12% on my bigger accounts, I would love that, right? Versus you got these a lot of traders, they come in, like you said, they put 1,000 in, they want to make 1,000 a week. How about you put 1,000 in, you made $500, you killed it.
Mhm.
I mean, but their mind doesn't think about that because they think about it as I'm going to come in and I'm going to turn this little bit into a lot. And I get that because I was that person. I needed to because I didn't have money. But you're not going to get there the way you think you're going to get there. I mean, unless you get lucky. It goes back to it, and then most of them that get lucky burn it up anyway, right? Because they don't know what to do once they have money. That's a whole nother problem. I was the same guy there too. I finally make a bunch of money. And next thing you know, I'm pissing it away like an idiot because I don't know what to do with it because I never had this much money. And it's this constant cycle. So it's like, I go back to that moment. If I would have told myself, slow things down, buy real estate,
Mhm.
invest in things, I would have been in a much different position in a much sooner time of my life. Instead, it takes for you to get into your 30s, or it takes for you a decade of doing it, or longer, or I mean, shorter in some cases too, but to where you eventually understand that. Yeah, I have to think long term. I go back to this the other day. I talk to my older friends about this all the time. That I got, some of my older friends they're well off, they're retired, done. I say, what's so interesting about where I'm at right now is that I've never thought more long term about my life, but I've never been older than I am this very second. And it's the weirdest thing because when I was younger, I didn't think about anything about the long term. It did not matter to me. It was what do I need now? And all my planning, all my decision making as a trader went into that. And so every single day I felt like I had to do something because that's the way my mentality was. I didn't think about planning the long term as a trader. I did not think about that. I didn't think about what I would do if I made money. I didn't think about what I did when I made money. I didn't think about any of that. I just thought about what do I need to do right now. In order, it's part of it is survival too. So that there is that element, and I understand that too. But if I would have slowed it down and the times where I had success, I would have had the ability to sustain success better in that middle part of my career than the way I handled it.
No, and it's incredibly important to understand like where that comes from. Like you said, like looking back, now you can understand where that comes from and go forward in your life. And I think that's something that comes with age too, like for me, like I was the same thing where it was like if I can make all this money, because it was the same thing and I really didn't realize this. And I don't talk about this much, but I guess I'll bring it up here just because it's important. But when I was riding and I was riding really well, part of that was going back, and I mean I beat the crap out of myself constantly. Like I had ruptured my spleen, I knocked myself out constantly, I had all types of problems, but I loved riding. But also like I was putting way too much of my life on the line for it. And it was, I thought one day maybe I'd ride so good, like my mother who like gave me up for adoption would maybe like notice, like these are things like I never said that out loud. I never thought about that out loud until years later. You grow up and you're like, yeah, that was in there. That was in there somewhere. It was the same thing with trading, at first when I was in my 20s, it was like, man, well, maybe if I could make all this money today, like I'll be this great person, or like, I'll buy a house and everybody will love me, or like, like it's things like that really like keep traders in that losing rhythm, like over and over again, because it just doesn't come like that. Like you said, like being long term, it's everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and people don't realize that if you think long term, your short term results will benefit from it.
Oh, cool, man. Let's cut it on that. That was really good. All right. Thanks, Anthony.
All right,
Oh,
buddy. Thank you so much for
thank you
having me.
so much for coming on, dude. This was awesome.